Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just gonna get cut to the chase here. I'm here to talk to you guys about Godzilla 2014, the film. I am doing this review after having seen it for the second time, so I can say that I've seen it twice in theaters. Once in IMAX 3D and once in 2D. So I have seen it in 3D and 2D at this point. FYI, just so we can we can set up a baseline, as they say. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Godzilla4, aka Julian Brezzi, and I'm a huge Godzilla fan, and I've been talking about this movie for years. So here comes the moment to talk about it. Here comes the big moment. I'm going to tell you about Godzilla 2014. I'm actually going to split up these videos into two parts, so that it's a little easier for you to digest, and I just don't want to do a whole video crammed full of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to split into two parts so you can enjoy it. Isn't that a good idea, Goji? Rawr. I think he thinks so. Great. So just for those of you who haven't seen it, I warn you, I'm going to have spoilers, and you're going to have to deal with it. So for those of you who have seen it, you may or may not agree with what I have to say, but these are the realizations and thoughts I've come up with. Alright, so first let me just give you a breakdown of the whole film. Spoiler coming up, okay? Deal with it. The film begins in 1999, and it actually goes right into introducing Serizawa, played by Ken Watanabe, and then he's got an assistant played by Sally Hawkins. They find a skeleton in the Philippines, and then some parasite thing. They find two. One's already hatched, and the other one's on his way to Janjira, where Bryan Cranston lives with his wife and his kid in Japan, and he is an engineer at a nuclear power plant. And it's also his birthday. And him and his wife work there, and his kid goes off to school. He doesn't get a chance to say happy birthday to his dad, because his dad's too focused on the tremors, because he's sensing the thing coming towards them. But he doesn't know what it is yet. So he goes to the nuclear power plant, and his wife is works down in the actual reactor, so she goes down with the team. And then the thing starts attacking the nuclear reactor, and everything starts going to hell, and some shit leaks, and then boom. Basically, it's awful. Bryan Cranston has to seal the door to stop the radiation from leaking. His wife dies. He's sad, and the nuclear power plant collapses. 15 years go by, and the little boy, Ford Brody, is now returning home. I guess he's from the Marines. They never really... No, he's in the Navy. I believe he says in the Navy. He's a lieutenant now. And he's going home to see his wife and his kids. He was like a little boy in the first... He already has kids? He's a kid. He was like 5, by the way. He was a little weird. Anyway, so yeah, and then his wife gets a phone call, and his dad is in jail. Goes to Japan. His dad was trying to sneak into the quarantine zone where the nuclear reactor... Basically, the nuclear reactor melted down, and then they cut off part of that whole area, just quarantined it off. So his dad's everybody thinks he's crazy, but he's like, no, I know what's going on. And his son's like, Dad, just get over it, you're crazy. And he's like, no, I have to go back. And he eventually convinces because his son's like, well, fuck it, you're not gonna stop, so we're going to go back in. So they go together, and they check it out, and they go to the home. And for one thing is weird, the radiation is gone. And for those of you who don't know, Chernobyl is still, to this day, the site itself has still a ton of radiation within that reactor. And that was 20, 30 years ago. For those of you who don't know what Chernobyl is, that's a different... Just look it up, Google it. And so there should be tons of radiation, and there isn't. So it's all gone. So then these guys arrest them. They get taken to where the reactor was. And now these new guys have set up shop, and they're called Monarch. And boy, we find out it's run by Ken Watanabe. And where the reactor was, now there's a giant fucking cocoon. And all of a sudden, this thing just wakes up, and boom! First flying creature comes out. Oops, I spoiled it. It's flying. Shit goes wrong. This thing collapses. Bryan Cranston is on this thing where these wires are connected to, and the thing breaks out. And it collapses, and he fucking falls down, and Ford is like, Dad! And then the flying thing flies away. Then NATO and the army come in, and they take over the operation. And the dude's like, all right, Ken Watanabe, or I mean Serizawa, who do you want with you? And Serizawa was like, well, we arrested that guy, but he said he was there, and he has information about what happened that day, because we obviously don't, so we need him and his kid. Well, Bryan Cranston dies on the fucking helicopter ride, so now he's kind of useless. So they ask Ford and everything, and Ford's just like, well, my dad said something about echolocation. So they go, oh shit, okay. And then also they explain the whole thing. Monarch was set up because in 1954 they found, they had located something up to that point, and then they tried to nuke it, and that thing was Godzilla. And Serizawa believes that Godzilla will return to restore balance. Also, the skeleton, like they found at the beginning of the film, was related to some creature close to Godzilla. And he believes Godzilla will come back. Then he shows him some old World War II footage they shot of, not World War II, like 50s footage of Godzilla getting nuked, which you also see in the opening credits. And then they decide to, the problem with the Mutos is, and the big thing we learned, and that's what Bryan Cranston knew, was that the Mutos spit out an EMP blast. So you can't really track it close because it'll just fry your electronics. So they're trying to hunt it down. And then Ford is just trying to get back home to his wife in San Francisco. So there's all, the thing's heading east, and they're all heading towards Hawaii, and then Ford gets on a helicopter to Hawaii, and then the Muto heads there, and then like a submarine goes missing, and they find it in a coast island of Hawaii, and the Muto's eating, basically, the nuclear reactor of the submarine. Because they feed off also radioactivity. Then, bum, 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 Godzilla shows up. Like Serizawa watches off the flight of an aircraft carrier as Godzilla shows up, and the whole thing you've seen in the trailer, I mean, the water recedes, and then a giant tsunami comes in, and Godzilla walks in, and they fire the flares, and he keeps walking. And the airport, for a while there was no power, but now it's all back on. And the Muto's in the airport, and Godzilla shows up in the airport, and here he is, and here's the little Muto, and then it does the reveal of Godzilla, and he roars, roar! And then it cuts to Ford's kid back in San Francisco watching a news TV as Godzilla and the Muto fight on TV. Then the next day, the Muto flies and keeps heading east, and Godzilla follows it by swimming, and the army just kind of follows him. And they go back to, like, what the fuck is the Muto looking for? Why is it flying east? And they realize, oh shit, it was talking to something. And then, at the beginning of the film, there were two things they found. One was already hatched, but the other one was still intact. They took that one and they put it in Yucca Mountain in Nevada. Well, now that thing's woken up, and that thing is even bigger, and it's attacking Las Vegas. And they find out that's the female, and that one starts heading towards the west coast. And Godzilla keeps following. And so the military comes up with a plan to decide to divert the creatures, all of them, even Godzilla, because they know he's hunting them, with a nuke. And they're going to put a nuke about 20 miles north of San Francisco and activate it and hope to kill them all with one shot. The problem is they can't fly it over, so they put it by train. Ford is like, well, fuck this shit. I want to be part of the army again. And so he's like, I want to help. And they're like, well, fuck you. We don't want you to help. And he's like, I have to. My kid's in the in the fucking city. And they're like, okay, you can help. And I guess he can defuse bombs or something, even though he hasn't really done anything up until this point that actually shows that. So he gets on a train with them, and they start moving. And then at night, the train gets attacked by a Muto. Mama Muto, as I call her. She fucking destroys the bridge. And it's a pretty eerie sequence, too. And then he falls in the water. He wakes up the next day, and he gets saved, as everything's gone to hell. And they recover the nuke still. And meanwhile, Godzilla finally surfaces in San Francisco. And then he attacks a bridge full of kids. And Ford's kid is also on a bus, because his mom is like, I gotta get you out of the fucking city. And he gets on the bus. At the same time, Godzilla hits the Golden Gate Bridge. So the army hits him, and he goes, fuck you, and he flies off. All of a sudden, the flying Muto comes in, and it, so the nuke that was on the train, they took it to San Francisco, and they put it on a boat. Well, the flying Muto comes in and says, fuck you, boat, and it grabs that nuke again, and then it takes it into the city. And that's where it meets up with Mama Muto, and they're, like, cuddling for a second. And it's like, here's a nuke, honey. And Mama Muto is, by the way, earlier when we saw her attack the train, she's preggers as hell. So she's like, good, we need to feed the kids, and she starts building a nest. And then Godzilla and the flying Muto are about to face off, and Elizabeth Olsen's wife, or Ford's wife, is watching it, and then the doors close. and then it moves on. Because now we're going to go on to the Halo jump, because earlier they explained that there's, you know, the male Muto has taken the nuke, and that shit's about to explode. And that's not the fucking plan, so we need to get that nuke out of there, even though there's giant monsters all over the city. We can't send soldiers in there because it's got EMP, so we need to fly you in and drop you in. And Ford is going to be part of that team, because he can defuse bombs. So yeah, so then after, you know, Godzilla and the Muto are about to fly and fight, and then the doors close. And it goes on to later, you know, they're doing the Halo jump. And you see them fly in, and the city's already been destroyed. And it's really dark and smoky. And they fly in, and they look for the nuke. And they find themselves in the middle of Godzilla fighting Mama Muto. And they also find Mama Muto's nest. You actually see her. She poops out her babies, and then she starts fighting Godzilla. So they go into her nest, find she's taken the nuke, and she's basically cocooned her eggs around it so that they can feed off the nuke. Basically like breast milk, except it's a nuclear fucking bomb. And so the little baby Mutos are all feeding off of it. So they take the nuclear warhead off of it, and they get it out of there. And then Ford's just like, fuck you guys. So he finds an oil tanker that's next to it, and he unleashes all the oil and lights it on fire, and fries all the eggs. And Mama Muto gets pissed, and she walks over. And Godzilla gets the chance, takes that opportunity to destroy the... Oh, by the way, he does his nuclear blast right before this. Yeah, he does it twice on Mama Muto. Fries her a little bit. It's pretty cool. And then he tail whips the flying one and fucking gets impaled. And then they get the fucking nuke. Amazingly, they walk a really long while. They get it on a fucking boat. And they're about to get it moving. And then Mama Muto's just like, fuck you guys. And she walks over and she eats a bunch of them. And Ford's just like, I gotta get this nuke out of here. So he gets on the boat and he starts moving it. And Mama Muto's just like, nope, not today, motherfucker. And Godzilla walks in and he's just like, fuck you. And he bites her in the back of the head, and then he just fries her with his nuclear blast, which I'll get into more detail in a bit. And then Ford drifts off a little bit, and then the bomb goes off. And Godzilla passes out. And then the next day, Godzilla's buried in dust. And Ford meets up with his kid and his wife. Happy ending for them. And you all think Godzilla's dead, but actually he wakes up. And he wakes up, and he gets up, and he walks off into the ocean. And the film ends. So, yes. So that is Godzilla 2014 in a nutshell. Just had to get that out of the way. Now, on to my critical analysis of the film, aka what I had issues with. Well, for one, there was there's a few logical issues that I had issues with. I think, for one of the first ones is that Ford asked the Monarch people, that's the organization that had the Mutos in Janjira, and he asked them, why didn't you just kill this thing? You had a cocoon for 15 years, why didn't you kill it? And their excuse is like, oh, we didn't know what would happen, you know? I'm like, that's the fucking stupidest thing I've ever heard. You had this thing for 15 years. You didn't know what would happen. You knew it was alive. You knew it could be a threat. We were told to study it. And then the second it's about to wake up, Sarazawa was like, kill it. I'm like, now you decide to do that? It busts out anyway, and you see how much of a threat it is. I'm like, you're fucking serious. These are the people in charge. So that, you know, there's that. And then they use the EMP blast thing as kind of like an excuse for the army not to really do anything, I feel. Like, the flying one is like flying around. It's like, oh, we can't take it down because it's got an EMP around it. And I'm like, do you not know how, like, missiles and bombs, like, can work? Also, there are plenty of times where they could have hit it. And, yeah, I just had some issues with that. That, like, why, I feel like the army was just like, oh, EMP, we can't do anything. Well, there's these things called artillery guns. There's cannons, anti-aircraft guns. Like, you can shoot something out of the sky without using electronic equipment. They did stuff like that in World War II. I hope you know that. So that kind of bothered me. And then when it hits Hawaii, I mean, it's kind of just... Another thing, Bryan Cranston's character, I feel like there was a lot of setup between him and his wife. Only it was like Hook, so that she would die and then you would feel bad for Bryan Cranston. And then he dies. And I feel like then it's like passing on the baton. It's like Bryan Cranston is sad about his mom. He's going to handle his problems to his kid. And Ford takes the story over. My biggest problem is just that there was like so much emotion put into the sequence between him and his wife. And like, especially watching it the second time, like I knew she was going to die. We never made time to make an emotional attachment to her. So I was like, why do we really care? Basically what I'm saying is, why was the wife important other than just making us feel bad for Bryan Cranston, who then dies later on? We didn't really need the wife. Like, honestly, it was kind of just to add more drama. The other thing we didn't really need is Elizabeth Olsen. She was kind of pointless throughout this whole film, except to be crying on the phone, be like, Ford, what am I going to do? She, like, really does nothing. Actually, she was kind of dumb. This is what pissed me off. She wanted to wait until her husband could get into the city. Because he tells her, hey, I'm getting on the fucking train to get into the city. And she's like, oh, she doesn't think, I better get the fuck out of here. No, I'm going to stay in the city with my son. I'm going to wait for you to get in here. Lady, the only reason your husband would be in the city is if, like, monsters are there and the threat is dangerous. Just get out. And she doesn't. And she waits until the last second. She goes, maybe I should get my kid out of here. I'm like, what kind of mother are you? Just get the fuck out of the city. I wouldn't wait for my husband. Because I know that the only reason he'd be in the city is if shit is going fucking down. So she kind of bothered me. She was kind of pointless. Like I said, both the wives were just kind of characters that added more to the Brodies. Like, oh, the Brodies need a little bit more interest in them. Let's add more. And that was the other thing with Ford. And other people have already complained about this. But, like, he was a little bit wooden. And I know that people have said, well, he was a veteran. And they tend to be a little bit, you know, more like that, you know, because they're used to that. But I feel like certain scenes, he just kind of seemed very like he didn't give a shit. Like when his dad died, he was just kind of like, oh, freaking out. But it wasn't believable. And when he's talking to his wife, he's just like, goodbye. Oh, very coldly, which to me was like, huh? That's your wife and your kid. You don't give a shit. And I don't know, like, the thing with ATJ is, like, he needs a little more refinement. I think the role was a little too deep for him. Like, for one, he always felt like he was too young for this. Like, I didn't believe that he was a dad who had a son that was 5. I was like, that's bullshit. I didn't believe that he was really freaking out about what was going on. I mean, he was a good character to be like, I'm gonna do this, but he wasn't really, like, I don't know. He was good for the action sequences when the film really picks up, but, like, for the emotional attachment, I really didn't attach well to him. The great thing is we have Ken Watanabe and Dr. Serizawa, on the other hand, who really, we get into him because he's the only one that really is counting on Godzilla to kick some ass. He's the only one who knows Godzilla's going to show up. He tells them, you know, his father was there in Hiroshima. And so he saw the nuclear devastation, and so his father gave him a watch. And there's some stuff in Godzilla Awakening as well, but that's a different video. And Godzilla Awakening adds a little bit more backstory of Serizawa's. But basically, Serizawa knows what Godzilla is capable of, and he knows that Godzilla is the only thing that can save us. Because obviously the army can't do shit. Because that's what kind of bugged me throughout this whole movie, is the army kind of just sits back and watches these things just fight. Like the Muto leaves Vegas and walks all the way to San Francisco, and the army does nothing. They watch it walk there. And the whole Halo jump thing was kind of like forced, because they could have taken a B-52 bomber and just airdropped bombs into the city. They didn't need the Halo jump. And I know someone's going to argue with me, well, an EMP would deactivate everything. I'm like, it just was an excuse so the army didn't have to do anything. Because I felt like all they did was just say, let's nuke them. Which was also a stupid fucking idea, because you want to activate a nuke 20 miles outside of San Francisco. Why don't you do it, like, near Alaska or somewhere else? Oh, with like, oh, minimal fallout. Minimal fallout! A megaton nuclear bomb outside of San Francisco? Minimal fallout my ass. Wait for part 2. And it's gonna cut soon. I'll just edit this.